Welcome to the Debunking Economics podcast with Professor Steve Keen. I'm Phil Dobbie, and today, well, most of us have heftier mortgages these days. In the UK, we owe about £1.4 trillion to pay off our homes. In 1999, it was less than £500 million, so it's trebled in less than 2 decades, 5 times the rate of inflation. And we pay out about £19 billion a month on mortgage repayments. So what's happening to that money? Is it still working its magic to keep the economy going, or does it slow things down? We'll look at that today on the Debunking Economics podcast. Well, I've always been told that house prices help contribute to the growth of a country, that if house prices are going well, then the country is going well, which I've always thought is a bit strange because it's not a particularly productive element of the country, is it really, and the economy? Because, you know, you buy a house to live in. There's only a certain number of people in the country, so you only need a house each at best. So if prices are going up more than inflation, then that's not because the economy is becoming more productive. It's because developers and homeowners know that they can get away with charging you more. So, Steve, I mean, why would we even think that house prices in any way contributed to the health of an economy? I think it was the other way around, isn't it?
Well, this is my position. I mean, houses are basically a consumption item, not a investment item. Because for one little simple reason, it's illegal to sell your children.
Really? Damn it!
So factories produce output which you can actually flog and make a profit out of. If you flog, pardon, I won't take that joke too far. But if you do the same, you can't do the same with housing. Housing is a place you live in. You're not going to be selling any output from your house. So to value it as an asset in the same sense we value a factory, I think is misleading to begin with. That's what we've got caught up with because, of course, to buy a house, you have to borrow money. Now, the trap when you borrow money is the borrowing money itself causes a feedback that actually drives up the house prices. And what you get out of that is if you've bought the house and you're leaving in your position to buy the house, you need back on the what I would regard these days as the good old days when you had to have a 30% deposit to buy a house. Then if the house price was $1 million and you put down a $300,000 deposit and the price goes up by 30%, in a notional sense, you've doubled your money because you put in $300,000. It's now worth $1.3 million. You can sell it for a $600,000 profit once you pay off the debt. And that's what got us caught up in the whole trap of seeing house prices as a productive asset rather than as a place to live. The thing is, of course, it's only productive if the price rises. It's because you're not selling anything in the house itself. You're just selling the house in toto.
But the question is, why would that happen? Why would that house go from 1 million to 1.3 million? Why wouldn't it just be going up in line with inflation? In which case you'd be saying, there's no benefit from doing this because it's just the same as putting that money in in an interest-bearing account, for example, or something which is more linked to the rate of inflation.
Well, there's two elements to it. One is the one that the Georgists always focus upon, and that is the idea that when you buy a house, you're not just buying a property, you're buying its location. And its locations and the value of it depends upon the location, not just in terms of what you've done to improve the property, but also what society itself does to improve the property. So my favourite example in the UK is the Queen Elizabeth. Is it the Queen Elizabeth line or the QE2 subway line going through?
The Elizabeth line.
Okay. Each time, when each new tube station opens up on the line that's following, the houses in the local area will go up in value because suddenly you're close to a tube station when that wasn't the case beforehand. And that becomes a transportation, a socially paid for way in which your value of your property has risen. So if you
and we've spoken about that before, and you say you get the benefits out of that. But I mean, that doesn't apply if you've got a house in the wilds of Scotland, for example, or in lots of places where there's not a lot of infrastructure being added. We're still seeing house prices increase. And that is getting back to the original question, that's seen as being a good thing, but it's not. I mean, it really doesn't influence the economy one way or the other, does it?
Well, it does in one sense if it actually encourages more construction development, which is again another circular argument. But the argument economists have always made in favour of the good side of rising values of assets, they believe what is called a wealth effect. And this is a major part of the argument in favour of QE when it was first taken on as well, quantitative easing. What the people spend not just on the basis of their income, but also on the basis of their wealth, actual or perceived wealth. And an increase in house prices was supposed to lead to people feeling wealthier and therefore consuming more. Now we're back in all sorts of dilemmas once more on the value of higher consumption. But empirically, the Federal Reserve has done one study where they looked at whether it is or is not a wealth effect. There is no wealth effect from shares. They couldn't find any whatsoever. So a variation in share prices had no impact upon whether people consume more or less. There was a wealth effect with housing, but not a large one.
That is bizarre. Why the difference? I mean, they are both the same in effect, aren't they? They're something you bought that has got a value, and you can leverage that to spend it on other stuff.
No, because it's not as easy you can't get a high value out of shares unless you sell them. If you want to get a capital gain out of shares, you can't get a loan for the capital gain of the shares. You can get a loan for the capital gain of your house. So there is the whole idea of what they call that when you refinance your housing or you use the house as an ATM, there's a financial reason why that increase in the valuation can actually finance an increase in consumption. There's no such thing with shares, because it's a very roundabout way to try to get a boost to demand. And why do they want to boost the demand? Because the economy is falling over. Why did the economy fall over? Because there'd been a housing bubble beforehand that burst. So we're back to the stage where it's circular reasoning rather than sensible reasoning that's getting us in trouble here.
One thing my parents tried to pummel into me, and I'm sure it's the same for everybody else, was that you should buy a house as soon as you possibly can, because if you rent, that's dead money. And I'm wondering if that's the case, because if I rent, I pay my landlord, and that landlord then gets money that landlord can then spend buying other things. So he has that money to spend. That money keeps circulating. So that's not a drain on the economy quite so much, isn't it? Even if my rents keep getting higher and higher, I might have less money. I can afford to buy less. It just means my landlord can buy more.
But it also means, and this has been an argument for some people who are eschewing house ownership as a means to wealth. They say, well, if you actually put aside the money you'd otherwise be saving for a deposit and buy shares with it, you'll actually get a higher rate of return. And I know quite a few colleagues have taken that route over time and done very well out of it. But the thing is, it's the easiest apparent route to wealth in the Western society, particularly one with which the deregulated finances we've had for 20 or 30 years in the West, is to buy a house and watch its house price rise. And its house price rises fundamentally because of deregulated finance. So again, we're caught with the circularity. It works while the level of mortgage debt continues rising, and that's the danger that we face. That all this last 40 years of expecting house prices to rise has been driven by a higher and higher level of household debt. And looking at the American data, which I think is the most the least contaminated by impact from the rest of the world, because it is still the world's most self-contained economy. If you go back to 1980, level of mortgage debt in America was 40% of GDP. If you fast forward to pretty much just before the 2000s, so let's 2 decades ago, it was 60% of GDP. It went from 60% to 100% over about a 10-year period. When it peaked, that was the end of rising house prices. It's then come down from 100% of GDP to about 75% of GDP. But the rising level of mortgage debt is the fundamental cause of the rise in house prices. It looks like you're wealthier, but in fact you're not, because the source of your wealth is more debt. And debt, of course, subtracts from your wealth.
Right. Well, there is a lot more to this discussion about whether high mortgages do actually slow growth. If you want to hear the explanation in full, then you need to become a supporter of Debunking Economics. Go to debunkingeconomics.com and pick one of the subscription options in the right-hand side of the website, or become a supporter of Steve's work on Patreon. If you go to patreon.com/Prof Steve Keen, if you pledge to support $10 or more per month, then not only will you be helping him with all his research, but also you get access to this and all the other podcasts in this series. So hopefully we'll see you back here again very soon. Thanks for listening.